So Kennedy is elected president, and he's inaugurated January 20th, 1961. Makes this famous, ask not what you can do, or ask not what your country can do for you, what you can do for your country. And everyone's like, okay, it's great. So after Kennedy officially becomes president, the CIA comes up to him and says, okay, we're ready. And he's like, okay, who's ready? And they're like, the anti-Castro Cubans, we've been training for the past year. And he's like, ooh, I don't know if this is going to be a good idea. And the CIA's like, we got to act quickly before Castro gets more support. And Kennedy's like, there could be zero ties to America. Like, they cannot possibly have a clue America was tied to this. And the CIA's like, we got this. Here's the plan. So here is the plan. This is what the plan is going to be. The CIA had given these Cuban exiles American bombers that we painted to look like Cuban planes. Now, really up close, you could totally tell. It's like, hey, look at my Prius. I painted it to look like a Ferrari. Of course, you would notice it. But it doesn't matter. It just has to be good enough to that when the airstrip in Cuba sees these bombers at a distance, they'll believe it's theirs because they're painted like theirs. And by the time the bombers get close enough where they can identify if they're actually American planes, it would be too late. The anti-Castro Cubans would be the ones flying the planes. Americans would have nothing to do with that. So the plan is, here we go, the bomber's supposed to go, they're going to bomb the airfield that's close to the Bay of Pigs, which is in the southern part of Cuba. So they'll create chaos. This will keep Cuba from being able to launch an airstrike against the foot soldiers that are going to land. So the plan is to destroy their airfield. Then that's going to be like the signal to like all the people in Cuba who want to rise up. The people in Cuba will rise up. So Castro's going to have to deal with the fires at the airstrip, plus all these people rising up. And then the anti-Castro Cuban soldiers, about 1,200 of them, are going to land in the Bay of Pigs, and they're going to like infiltrate Cuba, join up with the people who have already risen up, and they will overthrow Castro. It'll be no problems at all. It'll be smooth, it'll be great, it'll be Cubans taking back Cuba. And Kennedy's like, I just have a bad feeling about this. But okay, so he gives the order to do it. So in April, this becomes known as the Bay of Pigs invasion. So the bombers and the foot soldiers are not trained in the same place. So there's all these memos flying back and forth about what time, what day, what's going to happen. And apparently they got the wrong dates. So what does happen, April 15th, the bombers, thinking that's the date, fly over the Cuban airstrip, drop their bombs. The people in Cuba are like taking pictures of these blatantly, obviously American planes painted to look like Cuban planes. They bomb the airfield, which is the signal. So the people inside Cuba kind of like start rising up. But the foot soldiers thought it was the 17th. So they don't come. So Castro and his entire armed forces arrest all the people who rose up against him and put all the fires out, and then went to the Bay of Pigs, and they're waiting. So then the foot soldiers land thinking the planes had just gone. So they're like, it's going to be great, there's going to be chaos, it's going to be great. So they land on the beach, and there's like all of Castro's men. In the meantime, American naval vessels were like in the background. They were supposed to be there to look intimidating, kind of like just to let Castro know that we're like giving the thumbs up to this, and realize this is a disaster, so they all turned around and left. And Castro arrested all the people on the beach. And then goes to the United Nations and says, can you believe what America did? America did this. And then they have the pictures of American planes. We've arrested all the men. And the entire world is like, oh, America. I mean, even Britain was like, dang. And Kennedy looks like the biggest bumbling buffoon ever. This is like the third month of his presidency. And he's like, ugh, this is awful. And Castro's like, now, we just sent all these men to their death. And so we knew he would execute them all. We know Raul. We knew they would all be executed. So Kennedy called Castro and said, please don't kill him. Please don't kill him. Like, I sent them there. This is all my fault. I'll make a deal. And Castro said, all right. And so we actually paid Castro money under the table. And we got those men back. Those men back. The people who had started the uprising, right, the ones the bombers went, and these people from Cuba that did the uprising, the deal did not include them. They were all arrested. So Castro's plan is to keep control So what he did, instead of executing all of them right away, is he decided that he would execute them like 1 or 2 at a time every day for infinity. So my dad was in a Cuban jail in 1965, 4 years later, and my dad's like, the upper floor of the prison was still those guys. And every day they would escort 1 or 2 of them out, and a firing squad would kill them. 4 years later, to keep control. So the Bay of Pigs is a disaster for the United States. Great for Castro. The same week that that's happening, the Russians launched the first man in space. And the whole world is like, Russia, that's an amazing feat. That's amazing. America, I can't believe the Bay of Pigs. So the whole world is like praising Russia and condemning us. Like the worst week ever for any American president. Sucks. All right, so Yuri Gagarin becomes the first man in space, and of course, like Kennedy's like, "Where's our guy in space? Where's our guy in space?" And the American NASA's like, "We're working on it," and Kennedy's like, "Yeah, go!" And so the next month we shoot Alan Shepard up into space. Just FYI, we're not ready for this. So like Yuri Gagarin goes up into space. He's like chilling in orbit, up there hanging out. Our guy goes up and then he comes right back down. But he was up there. And that's when Kennedy pledges that we will have a man on the moon by the end of the century. Okay. Moving on. Late 1961, the Berlin Wall is completed. Now it really is this sort of symbol how there will never be peace between us. And apparently, there's not between Kennedy and Khrushchev any kind of love. But in October of 1962, we discovered probably the most disturbing thing ever. So aerial surveillance over Cuba, so our U-2 spy planes flying over Cuba, have detected that Fidel is building a missile site and that he has missiles. Now, missiles are just a vehicle like a car. The difference is that where cars are meant to deliver a human, like you, missiles are meant to deliver a warhead. You wouldn't have missiles unless you had warheads. Now, we know Cuba's not nuclear, so we knew that the Soviet Union's planning on arming Cuba with nuclear missiles, and Cuba's 90 miles south of Key West, Florida. The missiles that we detected in our aerial surveillance are medium-range intercontinental ballistic missiles, which means from Cuba they could hit DC and then arc around to about Texas. That arc. They couldn't hit Vegas, so yeah, they're good. But they could wipe out like millions of people from the location in Cuba. And at the same time, we also discover a Soviet convoy of ships heading toward Cuba from the USSR carrying the warheads. So, what can we do? Kennedy calls his confidants in. He's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? What are my options? They're like, well, you can invade Cuba. But we can't invade Cuba. 1 foot of America, that's why he was like, we can't let them, like the Bay of Pigs can't be tied to us. If we invade Cuba, it is an act of war against the USSR. It will start World War III, for sure. If we attack the warhead ships, it will not detonate the bombs. They have to be detonated, so it'll just sink them. That is an act of war because it's international waters. If we let the missiles get to Cuba, it's going to put them in the hand of Castro, who has already threatened so many Latin American countries. He's trying to start revolutions in Latin American countries. If Khrushchev gives Castro control of military weapons, he may not use them against us, but he might use them against our neighbors, which would then provoke us to retaliate. We don't know what to do. So his younger brother, Bobby, who's smart, Bobby's like, we can't let the warheads get to Cuba. Like that has to be priority number 1. We can't attack the ships, so blockade Cuba. And Kennedy said, good idea. So we split a naval blockade around Cuba, basically saying no one gets into Cuba. It's an American naval blockade, which could be seen from the Cuban shores, as my parents are like, everyone in Havana was like cheering in the street. We all thought the Americans are finally coming to liberate us, which is not exactly what happened, but we did blockade Cuba. And so Kennedy's like calling Khrushchev like, you need to turn those turn them around. And Khrushchev's like, no. Like, how come you can have nuclear missiles in Turkey, like right across the border, like aimed at me, but I can't have them aimed at you? Like, that isn't fair. And Kennedy's like, okay, I get your point, but we control the missiles in Turkey, like we do. Like, they're under U.S. control. You're giving them to Castro. Like, he's freaking crazy. And Khrushchev's like, well, I kind of get it, but Castro wouldn't do anything without my permission. And we're like, have you seen the man with the beard? No. No offense, Mr. Magnus. Beard. Okay. So the Khrushchev won't turn the ships around. So everyone understands, our ships are under order if anyone tries to run the blockade to destroy the ship. So if those Soviet ships get to the blockade and Khrushchev orders them to break the blockade, we will fire on them. It will start the war. So Kennedy went public, and he was like, this is what's going on, letting the whole world know that if anything happens from this, if Castro launches any of those missiles at anyone, it is an act of war against the United States by the USSR with full retaliation. And everyone in America's like, holy crap. Like, literally, we are on the brink of nuclear war. And I know Mr. Gutierrez talked about it too. It is literally within 30 minutes of nuclear war at times. And part of it is our communication problems, that communicating to the Kremlin proved to be a difficult problem. But over the course of 13 days, we came so close to nuclear war. Like, it would have been nuclear annihilation. Like, none of you would be here. I wouldn't be here. And definitely wouldn't be here. Cuba would probably be obliterated from the map. So it was very close. Now, in the end, Kennedy and Castro, no, Castro had nothing to do with it. Khrushchev made a deal. Castro was actually kind of upset that he wasn't, like, included in this, but it's like, it's not about you. So it's about us. And so the agreement was, we agreed to dismantle and take out our missiles out of Turkey, and they agreed to take the missiles out of Cuba and never arm Cuba. And we agreed, if this happens, then we'll leave Castro alone, which we did. I mean, he just died, so we've left him alone for like 50 years. So that was the agreement that we made. It was kind of done under the table, but eventually it'll come out, this is what happened. But it was so close. And probably one of the biggest things that Kennedy and Khrushchev both learned is that the communication between the White House and the Kremlin, we got to do something about this. Because there were several times, you understand, this is how it goes. Kennedy would be like, I need to talk to Khrushchev right now. So he would like pick up the phone and be like the White House operator, and she'd be like, okay, hold on. And she had to connect to the DC operator, who had to connect to the international operator, who had to connect to the USR's international operator, who had to connect to the Moscow operator, who had to connect to the Kremlin operator, who would patch it through to Khrushchev. If any one of those is dropped, we start all over. So there would be times when you're like, we're so close, oh my God, no, we're not, get him on the phone. It's like 2 hours later, it's like, hello? It's like, what the heck? So they decided, and this, they kept to their word, we need a hotline. We need like a direct line from the White House to the Kremlin where Kennedy picks up the phone and Khrushchev's on the other end, like bypassing all this other stuff. And so they actually do build the hotline, and it will serve us well throughout the rest of this war. All right, so that is the crazy Cuban Missile Crisis. After that, both, maybe not Khrushchev, but Kennedy definitely realized how close we got to nuclear war. Things need to calm down. And so he starts rethinking our Cold War strategy, like our everything, containment, Vietnam, all of it. And he's like, we need to like take a step back and look at like our responsibility to the earth. And so in August of 1963, he and Khrushchev are going to meet in England, which is now a nuclear country as well. And the three of us are going to sign the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, where we all agree, and this is like our first step of kind of realizing our responsibility to the earth, where we all agreed to not test in the atmosphere anymore, to not test underground, and because of our space race, to not test in the atmosphere either, because we don't know the repercussions of exploding a nuclear bomb in the atmosphere. So we all agreed to do this. It worked very well. I do need to make you understand, up until this point, what we're looking at when it comes to nuclear missiles. So we're in this relentless Cold War, and it's heating up throughout Kennedy's presidency. We are working on the Davy Crockett, which in theory is like questionable at best. If we made one that was workable, it would change warfare forever. The Davy Crockett is a battlefield nuclear weapon. So think nuclear bomb in really small scale that we could carry to the battlefield. So we'd be fighting them in the battlefield, then he'd bring out the Davy Crockett, which would be like a grenade launcher. But instead of a grenade, it's like a mini nuclear bomb. That's what we're working on under Kennedy's presidency. We have increased our missiles. I told you a missile is like a vehicle to carry a warhead. What we have now is multiple warheads on one missile, which means they could launch one missile at LA, and instead of it being one warhead, it could drop 3. It would be 3 ground zeros in LA. And we, of course, have the same capability to do to Moscow, wherever we want. The body count would be astronomical. It's one of the reasons why Kennedy also felt that neither of us are ever going to start the war, because we would ensure our own destruction, for sure. Like, for sure. Like, it's not even a question. If one of us pushes a button, we're all going to be dead. So that's what we're working on as far as nuclear weapons go in the early 1960s. By the way, we improved them. The biggest one we actually have in the U.S. is the Peacekeeper, called the Peacekeeper. Can hold 10 warheads.
Oh, great.
They've all been dismantled because of George W. Bush. He dismantled all of those. The biggest we have now is, I think, Minuteman III, which can hold 7.
Oh.
All right? So but you need to understand, all of this technology is only capable because of the space race. To get a man to space had to be rocket technology, which we then use for our missiles. And then the more we improve our missile technology, the better we can improve our space program. So they go hand in hand, even though they seem unrelated. Like getting a man to the moon doesn't seem like it should have anything to do with the multiple warhead missile, but the technology is the same. And so the more we get into the space race, we're going to get a man on the moon means the further we're going to get into making even better nuclear missiles. All right, so moving on. Okay, Vietnam. So the communists in Vietnam are trying to take over South Vietnam. They're fighting an evil person that they don't like at all. They want Ho Chi Minh as their leader, so they're communists. That makes it a communist uprising, which we have committed troops to. Kennedy's going to continue. He really thought he could squash this during his presidency. By the time we get to 1963, however, we have 23,000 American troops that are fighting in the jungles. There are no battles. This isn't battlefield like it was in World War II. This is literally all jungle warfare, all guerrilla warfare, and our guys are walking into trap after trap after trap, and they're getting killed just by the hundreds and hundreds against an enemy we can't detect because they're just villagers. They look like all the other Vietnamese. We don't know who they are, where they live. All we know is that they hate us, and they don't want us there. But our commitment to stopping the spread of communism will keep us there. So after the Cuban Missile Crisis, when Kennedy's like, we need to rethink our Cold War strategy, part of that is Vietnam. So by the time we get to the end of 1963, Kennedy is like, I have decided we've got to rethink Vietnam. And he told his closest confidants, including his little brother Bobby, that I'm going to reduce the forces in Vietnam. And so he ordered a reduction in forces by 1,000, which is, I mean, there's 23,000, so most of them will still be there, but it is the start of trying to bring our forces home. In the beginning of November of 1963, the CIA told Kennedy, like, we can't control No Dinh Diem anymore. Like, he is just this arrogant jerk. I mean, he is the cause of all of our problems. And the CIA, together with a group of South Vietnamese military men, plotted and then followed through with assassinating No Dinh Diem and his wife. And we were hoping that with the death of this leader that everyone hated, it would stop the sort of uprising. But what they want is Ho Chi Minh, and we're never going to give them that. So the fighting will continue.
Why his wife too? Why is that someone who?
Because politically, she was like his right-hand man, like his strongest advisor, and they detested her. Like they killed Mussolini's wife too.
Yeah.
Like they were like hated her. I have a video with her on it. Afterwards, you're just like, oh. But anyways, moving on. All right, so we thought that was going to change everything. And maybe it would have, because Kennedy's already committed to kind of reducing our forces in Vietnam. But then 2 weeks later, Kennedy is killed. So then we'll never really know, like, if Kennedy would have followed through with his policy of bringing home all of our troops. We don't know, all right, because he's dead. And his vice president, Lyndon Baines Johnson, or LBJ, will take over. Now, LBJ is not a foreign policy president as well. When he served in Congress, he never served on any foreign committees, anything like that.
Oh.
But Vietnam is a big issue.
When did we get into Vietnam?
Originally, so Truman committed about maybe 35 military advisors when they were fighting France. And then once we get to Eisenhower, he commits another, say, 400 to 700 troops throughout his presidency. Kennedy will escalate it significantly to 23,000. So technically, late 40s all the way through.
Okay.
Eisenhower will be the bigger one because he's going to send hundreds there, so in the 50s.
Okay.
But Kennedy sends more, so in the early 60s.
Oh.
And now everything changes with LBJ. So in 1964, after 2 alleged attacks against American ships in the Vietnamese waters of Tonkin, and I say alleged because the first one happened, the second one did not, LBJ goes to Congress and says they've attacked American ships, we need to protect American lives in South Vietnam, I'm going to ask you for a blank check. I want you to give me whatever I need to protect American lives in South Vietnam. And Congress said, of course, you got to protect American lives in South Vietnam. So they gave him the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which is basically the authority to do whatever he needed to do in Vietnam. Johnson is going to use this to prove to the world America stands against communism by escalating the war dramatically. By the time he is done, there will be about 700,000 troops in Vietnam. All right? Trying to put down this rebellion. The more American troops come, the more villagers become rebels. And so we are locked in this no way to win battle in Vietnam for years. For years. Because there's no way to win because we don't know who the enemy is. We only know that they're Vietnamese. But everyone in South Vietnam is Vietnamese. So we don't know which villagers hate us, which villagers don't, which villagers just want to grow rice, which villagers want to grow rice and blow us up in the head. We don't know. So we're locked in this battle that we can't seem to get out of. And he has escalated it phenomenally. Phenomenally. All right. In 1965, a group of military staged a coup in the Dominican Republic and replaced the existing regime with a pro-Castro regime, which in America's terms means pro-communist. Because Castro supports them, therefore they must be evil and communist. They never claimed to be communist, but we believe them to be pro-Castro means you're pro-communist. And because the Dominican Republic does not fall into the sphere of influence of the USSR, we can land there. So it's not like Cuba. So we send 30,000 Marines there to topple their alleged pro-communist government and then hold an election for the people to choose their leader. And the people actually do choose a leader that's not a communist. We're like, okay, that's cool, and then we leave. And Johnson's plan was to set the example that this is what we will do to all Latin American countries. Because Castro's trying to promote revolution, so there's revolutions in Nicaragua, there's revolutions in El Salvador. So we wanted to show the people that if this happens and you set up a communist regime, we're going to come in and squash it. And so we use the Dominican Republic as the way to show that to the Latin American countries. All right, so that is 1965 to 66. Also in 1965, Khrushchev's a little crazy. I mean, he has a temper. We kind of know he has a temper. But we didn't know he was kind of like this. Like after the Cuban Missile Crisis, Castro, was like, oh, I can't believe I don't have missiles anymore. Khrushchev's like, what are we going to do now? What are we going to do now? Oh, now. So he's like, I know. So he decides to build a fleet of nuclear submarines. So he can station them all up and down the American coast on both sides. So that way if it goes to war, they'll have all these like nuclear submarines ready to go. And so he orders them to all be built in the 1960s. And so they're getting crazy building them. And a lot of communist leaders in Russia are like, what are you planning to do with like them? He's like, I'm going to get them ready. And they're like, we're not at war. He's like, but if it goes to war, I want to be ready. And they're like, you're not going to launch them, are you? He's like, no. But and the communists are like, Khrushchev, you're getting a little like psycho. And he's like, no, I'm not. I'm just ready. And they're like, And in 1965, they're like, he's not. So the communists are like, Khrushchev, we want to talk to you. We think it's time you take a vacation. A really long vacation. Like for the rest of your life. And they actually removed him from power and they kind of placed him under house arrest. But don't feel sorry for him, like, oh no, it's like a castle with like servants and anything he wants, from which he will write his memoir. And then he will die peacefully. But Khrushchev is removed from power because the communists there were like, he is like out of control. So he is replaced with Leonid Brezhnev. And Brezhnev is militant, like the USSR is not going to lose this, but he's level-headed, where Khrushchev had such a temper, and that's what really worried them about the nuclear submarine. Like, he has such a temper. He might just one day be like, and that's it, the whole world's obliviated. Brezhnev has a cool head, so he'll be able to keep things a little bit under control. So Brezhnev takes over the reins, and he's going to kind of have to do the same thing, getting his Russia to be his. So there's a little lull in the Cold War during this time, not for long. Because now we get to 1968. it is really a bad year for the U.S. I mean, if you ever really feel like miserable in your life and you get your hands on a time machine, just go to 1968 and live the year and watch. It is like the worst year in U.S. history. So it starts off with January. So let me lead you into January. In 1967, our troops in Vietnam, of which now again are a few 100,000, are starting to notice that there's like less traps. There's like less like ambushes. And so our troops are under the impression that the VC, our enemy there, are like just getting tired of the war.
VC.
Yeah, Viet Cong. Yeah, the villagers who are rising up. We refer to them as the Viet Cong. We think we've turned the corner. Finally, it's almost over. So we keep going deeper into the jungle, and there's less and less traps, and it's just like a good. By the time we get to the early 1968, everyone in America, our troops in Vietnam, all believe the Vietnam War is almost over because there's so little resistance now. What we did not know is that they're luring us into a trap. We had no idea. They're like, yes, America, come on, deeper into the jungle. Come on. And we're just like, woohoo, we're going to be home for Valentine's Day. So Tet, which is the Vietnamese New Year, falls in late January. It does move around like our Easter does. It has always been a time of peace. For as long as we have been in Vietnam, it is a day of not fighting. And usually what has happened in the villages is they have a celebration, and if Americans are in the area, we usually have joined in the celebration. The villagers bring coffins in to represent each of the loved ones they had in their village that were lost that year so they can like send them off into the next life. In the towns, it's like a huge celebration because it's New Year's. Americans have always participated in this. Our entire time that we have been in Vietnam, we've participated in Tet, and now it's almost over in our minds. So we thought one last Tet celebration, it'll be great. Oh my God. We had no idea how coordinated an ambush this was about to be. In the villages, at whatever given time it was, the coffins just kind of popped open. Men with machine guns just jumped out and started killing American soldiers. In the cities, it was literally like we're all drinking, we're all having fun, and then suddenly the entire bar turns against you and start killing Marines. And they bombed the U.S. Embassy. I mean, this is 200 cities had a coordinated attack, which they all did with no phones, definitely not cell phones or internet. That means they've been planning this for months. We haven't turned we haven't turned the corner in Vietnam. It has turned against us. And how are we going to win this? Everyone who served in Vietnam that was there during Tet lost somebody. They were injured or killed during the Tet offensive. And our soldiers there are like, I mean, how would you feel? You thought you were going home? You're going to be there for years. And you're angry and sad and hurt and felt betrayed and all of it. So about 6 weeks later, a lieutenant colonel told his men that they found one of the villages of these like communists and that our orders are to go there and destroy them all. So under orders, the soldiers went in there and we killed the entire village. Mostly women and children, unarmed. Women were grabbing their kids and like running into the forest, and Americans were chasing them and gunning them down. Rounding them up into a pit and shooting all of them. Because we were told they were traitors to us and they were part of this. And we killed them all. It is known as the My Lai Massacre. There was a reporter there documenting all of it, taking pictures of Americans killing women, killing children, rounding them up, machine gunning them in a pit, sending the photos back to America where this is what we're doing in Vietnam. At that moment, America turns against the war and against our soldiers, which we have never done. Now, it is one instance of one village, but in America's mind, this is what's happening in Vietnam. And the protests against Vietnam soared to unparalleled. They became incredibly violent. College kids were burning buildings in their campus. Just massive riots in the street. It was out of control. This was March. And then on April 4th, Martin Luther King Jr., completely unrelated, is standing on a balcony in Memphis, Tennessee, where he is gunned down by a white man, prompting the worst race riots in American history. It's not his death that prompted the race riots. It is the fact that the white man who shot him, even though the police knew who he was and the car, managed to get away because the police did nothing to find him. It turned America completely against law enforcement. Couple that with our Vietnam War, and America is out of control. cities, including LA. The Watts section of LA had one of the worst race riots we saw. It was 60 cities simultaneously rebelling against, for race reasons, in addition to the cities protesting Vietnam. And Lyndon Johnson just declared a state of emergency across America. How do you, there aren't enough soldiers to control this. And our soldiers are in Vietnam. Our country is out of control. Now, what we need, it's election year, by the way, 1968. Lyndon Johnson initially said he was going to run again, and then when everyone turned against the war, he's like, oh, I changed my mind. His country's out of control, and he can't control it. And so our hopes are that whoever is elected president can solve all of it. The racial tension, the problems in Vietnam, all of it. And the front runner, hands down, is Bobby Kennedy. He's the one, I mean, everyone knew him. He was smart. He was charismatic, like his brother. He's the guy, you don't know this, but in 1960, Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested down in Alabama, and Robert, or Bobby Kennedy, actually flew down there, talked to the warden, and got Martin Luther King Jr. out of prison. He is known in the racial community as someone who is all about equality. He's also very stringent. Like before my brother died, he wanted to end Vietnam, and I will continue that. I will bring an honorable end to Vietnam. Everyone's like, he's our guy. Now, in June, California had their primary, one of the biggest states, right? And they choose Bobby as the Democrat to run on the ticket. I mean, of course they didn't choose him. He's really the front runner. And so it's got to be Bobby. I mean, Bobby's the one who's going to fix all this. State of California, most states have agreed, this is great. So Bobby gives his thank you, California, you're all great speech, and then leaves the platform where he's giving his speech. He's walking through the hotel, because they're doing the back, the secret walkways to get to the kitchen, out the side door, so he's not mobbed. And a guy comes up and shoots him dead. Sirhan. He was an Arab. Kennedy was pro-Israeli. Before he can become president, I'll kill him. Bobby dies in June. Our hope dies with him. So the Democrats then have to scramble, right, to come up with a presidential candidate. So at the convention in Chicago in August, the Democratic National Convention, they elected Hubert Humphrey to be their running guy. He's the one who's going to be the one who's going to have to do because Bobby's dead. And outside, down the street, there's a park where there's a huge Vietnam protest, and they decided to move the protest to the Democratic National Convention so that the Democrats would see that the people want an end to Vietnam. The police show up, the protesters begin throwing bottles and rocks and just throwing things at the cops, so the cops just go crazy and beat the crap out of all of them. It is considered a police riot. And it is, they had to put Chicago, they have problems in Chicago. Nothing has changed in Chicago. But this violence is tearing America apart. We need an end to all of it. So in November, we elect Richard Nixon. And the reason we picked Nixon is because what he said he planned to do in Vietnam. His plan is called Vietnamization. I know it's a great name because if it was Oranga, it would be a Oranga nomination. But it's not, so Vietnamization's pretty good. So here's the plan. We can't just pull all of our troops out of Vietnam at once. I know a lot of Americans would love to do that, but if we did that, the communists in South Vietnam would win, and we would lose Vietnam. So we can't do that. So the plan is, this is what Vietnamization is, to bring our troops home slowly while simultaneously recruiting South Vietnamese into the military and training them. So as their army gets bigger, we can bring more of our troops home. As their army gets bigger, we can bring more of our troops home. As their army gets bigger, we can bring the rest of our troops home. And then in the end, it'll be their army fighting the rebellion, and we'll be home. And it made a lot of logical sense. We have used that strategy before. It's successful. So that's the plan. So we elect Richard Nixon, and sure enough, that's what he plans to do. Okay, so the only way this will work is if we start training the South Vietnamese to be soldiers. We can't use the soldiers we already have there because they're fighting. So the only way for this plan to work is to send more troops there to do the training. We have 0 volunteers who want to go, Thus, the only way this plan will work is if we start a draft. So then Nixon starts a draft. We haven't had one yet for Vietnam, and people throw a fit. Of course they do. They thought the war was almost. You said you were going to bring troops home. You're sending more troops there. Oh. So there's a lot of friction, especially in the first year or two. All right, when he's trying to draft these troops and send them over there so that he can train them and then bring our troops home. So this is the initial kind of craziness that happens with Nixon. But at the same time, there's other stuff going on with Nixon too, which I think is where we're going to go next. Détente, yes. All right. So all of this would not exist if the relationship between the U.S. and the USSR could somehow just calm down. We could just take a step back and just breathe. Then maybe we could work things out diplomatically, and we wouldn't have to fight things like Korea and Vietnam and all of these other problems around the world. But there's so much bad blood between us. We can't just suddenly start being friends. So Nixon starts off with, I need to see how Brezhnev feels. I just need to know, does Brezhnev feel the same way I do about wanting to calm things down? So he's going to set out bait and see if Brezhnev bites. So here's the bait. Nixon announces that if the Soviet Union will formally recognize West Berlin, then the U.S. would formally recognize their control of Eastern Europe. So let me explain recognition. It's not the same as I asked you if you recognize that guy and you're like, yeah, I've seen him before. It's different for a country. If a country formally recognizes another country, it means that we accept them for who they are as is, which Russia has never done with Berlin. So if they agree to do that, then we're going to agree that, hey, you control Eastern Europe, and we're good with that. That would be a big step for both of us, but we don't know if they're going to take the bait and agree. This is our test to see if they want the same thing we do. So we're kind of all waiting, and then Brezhnev finally makes an announcement that I have decided the Soviet Union is now going to formally recognize West Berlin. And we're like, and so Nixon's like, oh, and we formally recognize your control. That's our whoo. Now, what most people in America didn't really quite realize is going on is that Brezhnev and Mao from China hate each other. And what's going on at this exact same time in 1969 going into 1970 is that Brezhnev and Mao are arguing over the border between the two countries. So they have both sent troops to the border. There was actually one little skirmish between them, but that was not that big of a deal. So we're watching this going, oh, wow. And by we, I really mean Nixon, who's going, that's kind of cool. So we've already got Brezhnev saying, oh, yes, obviously he wants a little bit of peace. So then, while he's trying to decide how he's going to play the whole Brezhnev versus Mao thing, he gets a phone call from Poland. It's from U.S. ambassadors in Poland. They're at this meeting in Poland. And these diplomats have encountered Chinese diplomats, ambassadors actually. And our ambassadors don't know how to respond to the Chinese because we have yet to go to a meeting where there's Chinese. But we're in Poland, right? Because we have just formally recognized them so we can go visit now. And so our ambassadors don't know what to do. So our ambassadors call Nixon. They're like, look, dude, the Chinese are here. What do you want us to do? Do you want us to ignore them? Do you want us to go talk to them? Do you want us to flip them off? What do you want us to do? And Nixon's like, they're there. The Chinese are there. Go talk to them and see what happens. And our guys are like, okay. So they're like, suck. And the Chinese are like, what do we do? I don't know. So they're on the phone calling Mao the Americans just came up and talked to us. What do you want us to do? And Mao's like, hey, say hi. And they're like, okay. So, by the way, please don't write "suck" on your paper. The Chinese said "suck." On the IB exam, I can see it now. These kids from Vegas. All right, so our ambassadors start talking. We're like, okay. Nixon's like, perfect. So then Nixon goes to the UN and he's like, I can't believe we have left communist China out of the UN for so long. And everyone's like, you're the one who said that, America. And he's like, this is a new era. I think we should let in the Chinese. And so everyone's like, all right. And Russia's looking at us and so then Russia's like, hey, so America, What else you got? And America, Nixon's like, hey, so then let's talk about Russia now. Like, what can we do to help Russia? And they're like, well, they need food. He's like, done. Russia, hey, we got all this extra grain. Would you like some? We'll sell it to you at below market value. It's called the Russian grain deal. And Russia's like, yes. And we're like, okay. And China's like, what? Oh, I have to get to the ping pong. We don't have time. It's only 35 seconds. We'll start with ping pong tomorrow. As in, yes, table tennis. As in, yes, how ping pong will now save the world. Like Mickey. We could get Mickey to play ping pong. Oh. Should I press it?
Honestly, that little ad or whatever that showed up.